elections. I'm the chair, Pete Peterson.
Christopher Constant.
Jamie Hines, Acting Deputy Clerk of Elections. Barbara.
Oh, I'm sorry, Barbara Jones, Municipal Clerk.
Shelley Rotten, Office of Assembly Council.
And do we have any committee members that are calling in on the phone?
Mr. Chair, this is Suzanne LaFrance.
Okay, thank you, Ms. LaFrance. Anyone else? Okay, so we'll go down to new business, the special municipal election update. And is that you, Jamie, or is that Ms. Jones?
I can certainly start us out. Our special election is coming up on June 21st. It's for District 1. There will be 30,461 ballot packages mailed. There were 123 military and overseas ballots for this particular election. The military, overseas, and out-of-state ballots dropped on May 23rd. There was 1,488 ballots. Everything else drops on in Anchorage on May 31st. We are fully staffed and ready to go for the election, and our logic and accuracy test for this specific election is tomorrow morning at 10. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Do you have any additional information, Ms. Jones? Okay. And so how many overseas ballots did you say there was?
There was 123 military and overseas.
Okay. Mr. Guston?
Yeah, what was that 1,488 number?
That was military, overseas, and out of state.
Okay, the difference is out of state.
Any additional questions? Ms. LaFrance, do you have any questions?
No questions at this time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I think we've got that update, and we have enough personnel lined up to facilitate the election.
We do. We're a little bit nervous with the states, but many of our staff work for the state as well. But we think that with them wrapping up hopefully about the 15th, they'll be able to come over and work for us and get us going.
Okay, great, fantastic. So I guess if we have no additional information or questions about the special election, let's go to new business B, risk limiting audit from the regular municipal election.
So I get to talk to you about the risk limiting audit, and we haven't finished our report yet. But in my opinion, a picture is worth 1,000 words, and so there's about 3,000 words for you. And so to tell you a little about the risk limiting audit, first I've had to brush up on some math skills that I probably haven't used for probably about 20 years. And so the first picture shows the dice toss. And so this is one of the ways that the risk limiting audit selects random batches, and this is called a seed number. So we have is it
10
I'm going to get it tongue twisted here. It's 10-sided die, and so you end up tossing the die 2 times, and you get 20 numbers from that you put into what is called a seed. And if you want to take a look at the second page, you can see the pseudo-random number generator. And this is a public document. I think it's called public source document. And so you can see in the first line there where it says seed, that's the random number that we put in there based on 2 tosses of the 10-sided die. So then if you go back to the pictures, so that was 1,000 words for the first 2 pictures. And then on the next part, it shows the setup for the risk limiting audit ballot tally. So what we did was we had top 2 candidates and yes and no on a prop. And you can see we have 3 buckets, and the buckets are for yes, no, and other. So like on a proposition, yes was green, no was yellow, and an undervote or an overvote would have gone into the red. That was the other. And so then, remember, we selected a bunch of random ballots. We had, I believe, 2,119 ballots were selected for the proposition and 194 for the candidate race. So of the 2,000 ballots that we're looking at, a lot of them, they weren't all for the same district. So a lot of them were blank for the candidate race. So for the candidate race, the green bucket was for candidate 1, the yellow bucket was for candidate 2, and then the red bucket was for all other candidates if it was that race, or for all other assembly districts. So it was a little bit complicated. But if you take a look at the third page, you can see how the colors kind of came into play here. So you can see column A for the proposition is yes, that's the green one. The yellow column for column B for proposition no. And then you can see we had a couple of marks there where somebody didn't vote, or it was either an overvote or an undervote. And so that's how we kept track using the little colored buckets. At the end of each batch, we added up the total, as you can see on the tally sheet, for each of those categories. Then the next step was verifying the ballots. So we had sorted the ballots, obviously, by yes for the prop or for the top candidates, and then we had a team over there verifying that the ballot was marked in the system as it was actually voted. So they were like sorted all by the yeses or all by the nos or by the candidate. They checked to make sure the mark on the ballot was the same, and then that the audit mark was the same. And so we are still working on finishing our report for you on this. As you can see, it is a little bit complicated. It was pretty fun, and I'll just tell you again, it challenged some of our math skills. Do you have any questions?
I don't remember seeing these pictures previous elections.
No, so the risk limiting audit is something somewhat new for us. We began looking at risk limiting audits in 2020, I believe. And at that time, we purchased imprinters on the scanners. So I think some of you may recall that when a ballot is scanned, it gets a number. The number is based on the scanner. They're numbered 1, 2, and 3. And then each time you run a batch of ballots through the scanner, the system assigns a batch number to it. We keep track of the batch numbers in a log at each location, and then also when they're stored in the vault after the scanning, they're stored by batch. We had, I believe, 772 batches that we pulled our sample of 2,111 ballots from. So because that system assigned the scanner number, the batch number, and then each ballot in the batch a number, that's how you can go back and pull those 2,111 ballots.
Mr. Constance?
So, when you rescan a ballot, does it get a new number mark on it?
So we didn't rescan ballots. That's not, now that isn't something that we do. So this was, the red buckets are showing you, and this number is showing you a hand count. So we hand counted those ballots in those races, but then we verified the adjudication on the system, so they were not rescanned. Now, I will tell you there are some circumstances when we're scanning and you get a jam, and our policy is that you discard the batch and rescan it. And so you're right, there's going to be a new number. So the number is listed right here. So if you have a rescan, you have to go like that, and then it goes here. And then if it does it again, you do it like that. But one time we had to move it so it did it up the middle because we hit too many. So yes, it does get a new number.
So, one more.
Mr. Constance?
I'm a layman in all this. I don't know what conclusion to draw.
There is no conclusion to draw yet because we're just updating you. This happened. It was interesting. This is going to be part of the results for you, but we don't have the results yet. Yeah, we'll have that. It'll be an official report that'll be submitted to the assembly.
Last question. So on the page with the numbers on it,
Yep.
there's one number that has a strike through, it looks like a 4 and it's scratched out. What was that strikeout for? It's the far right top.
Well,
What does that mean?
Well, it looks like an error.
Right.
So what happened was it looks like she started to write a 4 and then crossed it out, and the total was 41.
So just from a process perspective, there's 2 other errors at least
Yes.
that don't have the same marks, and so we might want to standardize the demarcation.
Got it.
for
And
future
initial that or
purposes. Right.
something like that, right. So
It's all good. De minimis, but I just try to understand.
So you can see that there were 44 ballots in that batch. So the first count was the propositions, and we sorted all of those and counted them. And then the second count was the candidate race. So that's how I know it's accurate. But I think you're right. We can do a little better on that.
Just to understand it.
Okay.
Just seeing this report for the first time right now, so we're trying to absorb some of this.
Right. I want to make sure that you understand this is kind of like show and tell. it's really not a report yet. Looking up the terms for risk limiting audits and the different types of risk limiting audits, there are like 3 different types of risk limiting audits, and there are various ways to set up your risk limiting audits. And last year in 2021, we attempted to do a rather complicated, more complicated risk limiting audit using one of these true statistical methods. But I'll just give you an example. In some of the materials I'm reading, there was a jurisdiction that had over 2 million voters, and they did these calculations, and in one race, the number of ballots to test, I think I told Jamie the other day, there were 2 races. One was 49 ballots, and the other race was maybe 400 ballots out of 2 million. And last year we didn't like that. We couldn't explain what we had done. It was too complicated. So this year the system was 3% in area-wide races, and since district races are 1/6 of the area-wide, the state of Alaska uses 3%. We did 1.5% in the district races. So that's where we came up with the 2,119. And so I'm telling you we did this, and I'm showing you some clever things that we think that we did, using the colored buckets and the colored spreadsheet. But this isn't a report on the risk limiting audit. That is just taking us a little bit more time to get to you. And we'll get it to you. The results were satisfactory. The machines performed the way we expected them to, but we still have more to document that and explain how we got from the beginning to the end. We got to the end, and you can see the process, but explaining it is a little complicated.
I did not know that they even made 10-sided dice.
You need to talk to John Weddleton. He's a primary dealer in town.
Is that where these were?
I don't know where they came from, but he's the D&D merchant in town, Dungeons and Dragons.
Okay. All
I
right.
think there's a 20-sided.
There is, yeah. There's a whole bunch.
Fine. You learn something every day.
Third craft.
All right. Well, any additional questions? Ms. LaFrance, do you have any questions about this? Since you don't have this report, it's not online, so I'll have to.
No questions at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, I actually just happened to think of a question that's not related to this. I'm wondering, how many people did we have sign up for ballot tracking, or what percentage was, do you know?
Well, that's a perfect little segue into something that we always talk about, which is our best practices. And I'll pass them out. We have been passing this out for all of our elections and ethics and elections committee meetings. On the back side is the ballot tracking. We currently have 5,425 signed up for ballot tracks out of the 205 registered Anchorage registered voters. many additional voters signed up from the state's effort. The state is also using ballot tracks. And we are providing an insert in our ballot package for the June 21st special election that explains to people how to sign up for it and what kind of notifications they can sign up for. The ballot tracks notifications, they can get tracking of their ballot by email, text, voice, or any combination of the three. Voters get updates when their ballot package is mailed to them, when it is mailed back to us if they use USPS, when we receive the ballot, when their ballot is adjudicated as good and will be counted, or if there is a problem and there is a need for a cure. So ballot tracking is line 6 on that sheet. And we have added number 7 to the sheet. That is pre- and post-election audits. The logic and accuracy testing is a pre-election audit. This verifies the readiness of the system for that specific election. Ballots with a predetermined outcome are run through the system, and when the results come out as expected, you know the scanning, adjudication, and tabulation system is working as it should. And then, as Barbara has explained, the risk limiting audit is the post-election audit. Contests and a number of ballots per contest are identified, and the machine count of the votes in those contests on those ballots is compared to a hand count to ensure that the system is working as expected.
We are recommending that we add that to our best practices for a couple of reasons. We have always done logic and accuracy testing in the municipality since I have been here and much longer before that. And I'm sure Jamie can confirm almost all clerks in Alaska do logic and accuracy testing.
Yep, logic and accuracy testing has been a part of every election I've been a part of.
So Jamie and I were a little bit surprised when we read some of the articles, and I'm not going to remember the jurisdiction.
Clackamas County, Oregon. Sorry.
Clackamas County, Oregon, which I didn't recall, but you may have heard that approximately 30,000 ballots did not scan through the tabulation system because they were misprinted. And the problem with that is apparently the election administrator said they didn't do logic and accuracy testing because they always did it and it came out fine. So, but that's the purpose of logic and accuracy testing. And so we want to make it a best practice and make sure that we do it every year and are reporting out on it.
Mr. Constant?
Thank you. I know I previously discussed with you, members of the staff, my concerns about the state and their postage policy. Have we heard back from them on what their plan is to address the scenario where if the USPS doesn't cancel prepaid envelopes, what they're going to do? Because I know I've talked with folks here, I've talked with everybody I could talk to. If we have an 8% rejection rate at that state election, it's going to be a nightmare.
I do not know the answer to that. I identified the issue as identified on, we don't have a note on here, but we did have a note on a former one that we do not provide prepaid postage because there's no guarantee that USPS will cancel, that they run a postmark on prepaid business reply mail. Now, we have also been told that they're supposed to do that with election mail. However, I think some of you may recall that Juneau did prepaid postage, and I think our rejection rate was, I don't think that after the election, we were in the, we knew we had like 200 some postmarked after election, but and the percentage is pretty low, but Juneau's was like 12%. So theirs was high because those envelopes weren't postmarked, or,
Canceled.
postmarked,
Yeah.
canceled.
Canceled.
So I do not know the answer to that.
So if I could ask, again, I will ask you, I'm asking
Okay.
everyone, talk to the Division of Elections and make sure that they have a plan that they can learn from our experience, Juneau's experience, so that we don't have a calamity at the end of that election.
I can let you know, we did notify them of this problem, so they do know the issue.
Everybody's notified them, they've not published any guidance yet, so I'm like, thank you.
You bet.
Well, and I'm wondering if we've thought about doing some more communications with the voters about not putting your ballot in the mailbox on election night, and to put them in a drop box instead, because there was the picture of the post office box being overflowed with ballots or whatever, and so there's a good chance that some of those were not counted because they didn't get canceled with the election day stamp on it.
I think our materials are super clear. I think that we had over 400, maybe even more. The number was double what it is now for envelopes that were rejected because of no postmark. And after that year, maybe it was 2019, the Election Commission directed us to do some outreach. It's on the instructions now to get, if you mail on Monday or Tuesday, to get it hand canceled. It may say that on the envelope. It may be ink jetted on the envelope. So we have put it in multiple places to remind voters, and the number dropped in half. So we feel pretty good about that. We think that we need to probably do more outreach with the post office during the year. Like one of the examples people give is on April 15th. They're outside collecting tax returns. So why aren't they doing that on election days? I guess that's a question we need to ask them and see if we can get some improved customer service for our voters.
Yeah, I had that thought myself because I can remember seeing pictures on the news of people dropped with their taxes, and the postal employee was right there, and so great. And I actually was surprised. I got a text the other day from the State Division of Elections saying that they'd received my ballot in the special congressional election, and so I guess once you sign up for Ballot Track, you're signed up permanently. You don't have to sign up for every single election. Is that true?
Correct. We learned that a few weeks after our regular election that due to the state special, they were using ballot tracks, and we learned through ballot tracks that registries were going to get notifications for all elections.
So I was surprised, but it was a good surprise.
I'm similarly surprised, and I think it makes sense because the state is the keeper of our voter roll. And if we had a separate voter roll, I think it'd probably be different. But because we share the state law requires that we use their voter registration documents. That's my guess why ballot tracks did it. At least that's how I sorted it in my head.
Actually, it was, I believe it was the Division of Elections. They knew we were using ballot tracks. They wanted to, and I believe that they made this happen so that it was coordinated. So thanks to the Division of Elections for that.
Fantastic. Let's see, any other information that you want to give us, or let's see, cruising this here. business that I have questions about. How about you, Mr. Constant? There you go. All right. Any additional information about the community election that you think that we need to hear today? Or?
Not that I can think of.
Okay. And do we have any old business that we need to go back and cover? The only thing I can think of is, the idea of getting some legislation through the legislature that a stamp is not a thing of value. And we talked about this a couple of times in the past. And if that were passed by the state, then that would allow campaigns to provide stamps to voters. At least I believe that would be the situation. Is that correct?
That would be correct, Mr. Chair. I think we've talked about it, and I'm not sure if we've actually, I think the steps are, it needs to go to the legislative committee, be part of the legislative package. Then you need a sponsor, and I'm sure you all know who to contact to sponsor it. And then it could get introduced next year in Juneau if you could find a sponsor. But we can certainly add that to our list of things to do and hopefully work with Mr. Gates, since it was his memo that told us you couldn't give out stamps.
Yeah, but I think that moon provides the exact language you need to
Okay.
change in statute. I will also suggest that to make sure it's on the radar for municipalities' legislative program next year.
Legislative program, right? Mr. Constant?
I had a couple of folks pretty passionate about the idea of maybe we come up with, and this I think it's fraught with difficulty, a way to just pay for postage stamps, not business reply mail, on the ballots, envelopes. Then I know we just burn up money for people who don't actually cast a ballot or who don't run them through the USPS, which is a vast majority of the ballots. But from a mathematical perspective, like this special election, I'm not sure what the postage is per ballot. Is it single first class or is it 52 stamps?
I believe it's 58 cents.
Right, so 58% of 30,000 would be roughly, $18,000 or something. Maybe that's a sunk cost worth considering at some point in the future. Because if they're stamped, then they have to cancel them, which would solve the problem. But I don't know that if you have 120,000 ballots that get mailed out, it's a substantially higher number. And so it's just a thought for future conversation.
Through the chair, we did talk to our printing and mailing vendor about this, and at the time that we talked to them, they said that nobody has 100,000 stamps to put on envelopes, so you have to make that request far enough in advance that you can get that many stamps from the post office.
And I didn't even consider the labor cost of applying stamps to all of those envelopes. So it's not a simple 58% of whatever the max number is, it's more. But still, it's a conversation.
Yeah. We can talk to our vendors about that during the off season.
I can remember sending out some mailings when I was a candidate one time, and I went and got numbers of rolls of 100 stamps, and we're sticking them after a while. Your fingers get all sticky, and it was problematic at best. But anyway, I just happened to think of another question. What was the percentage of people who put their ballots in the drop boxes this year? Do you know that?
I don't know that off the top of my head, but I can go print it out really fast.
Okay, all right. Because it has been, each year it's been increasing.
Yep,
And
it was over mail again, I believe. I think we had 1 year under, and now I think it's been maybe 2 years consistently drop boxes are higher.
Well, we've added additional drop boxes over the years as well, and so it's more convenient for people to drop them off. And once they found the location of their nearest drop box, you know, we are creatures of habit, and they're more than likely to continue to use that particular location of that drop-off, so.
And with the dilemma of not knowing if it's going to be postmarked in time, it might feel safer to use a Dropbox.
It is. Absolutely. Better bet.
That was one of the things that some of the people who were on the tour last week pointed out when they saw the drop boxes sitting there, and you know, they were going, wow, that's got to be a lot of work to take and install those all over town. And yeah, I said, you know, it's a logistical situation that you've got to plan far enough ahead to get that all ready to go. So,
Mr. Chair, the number is 64% was dropped off in the drop boxes and 30% was USPS.
okay. So more than twice as many in the drop box compared to the post office. All right.
So the difference of 6% was at the vote centers?
All right, fantastic.
And one number we can be sure, 100% of those ballots that were not counted for lack of a mark of a date were in the mail because you couldn't drop it in a drop box after 8. It was just no way.
Okay. Any additional questions or comments or information that you think we need to disseminate here at this meeting today?
Did we deploy Dropboxes today?
Oh yeah, we deployed 5 drop boxes today for the special election. They are at, I'm gonna forget one. I always do. West, Clark, Fairview Rec, City Hall, and out front.
Oh.
Remembered them all.
I noticed the one out front when I
Yep.
walked in today, so fantastic.
We have arrangements with the state of Alaska to make sure that if people use our drop boxes for their ballots, that we exchange them. We have a silver ballot box here because people are bringing their ballots here to drop them off. So we just have a procedure to exchange ballots with them.
Well, that makes perfect sense, you know. So because, do we know how many ballots of ours that were dropped off at the state in this most recent election?
I don't remember. It wasn't very many.
Like less than 20 probably.
Oh, good. All right. Fantastic. Well, that's good that people aren't confused with the state and local elections. They're getting that figured out. Fantastic.
Well, I think they're confused. I think they just assume that we do it all. We've had quite a few people come in and drop off here in the silver ballot box for the congressional election, and also they're coming in telling us that they can't find the drop boxes.
I see.
And our policy and practice is that everybody in Anchorage is a voter, and we don't expect them to know that the state and the muni are different, and we try to be as transparent as possible and provide them whatever services they need when they're here.
Well, have we reached out to the media to maybe to get one of the TV stations to do a story about where some of those drop boxes are located for this special election? Is that a possibility?
There's an ad in the newspaper that the first notice of election was published on Sunday. It says where they all are. There's our website, which is, the link is provided in that. And then I also do a series of press releases for the media. And then as we get close to the vote center opening, some more press releases will go out explaining where.
Okay, great.
We do want to be a little cautious and considerate, because if we advertise too much about the drop boxes, we think it will confuse people in the state election. So Jamie's press releases will be heavier after the state election is over.
When is is the deadline? What's the date for the state?
June 11th. I think, though, if I might, that's an interesting idea to get a story not on our election, but a story on the fact that there are in fact 2 elections and how voters can do what they need to do to make sure their vote is tackled in a way that meets the needs of both. So then that can help raise awareness of the elections. It can help direct people to the right place, and at the same time, just kind of make people feel good things are happening. So I think that's a story they would pick up.
I will definitely contact the state and work on a joint press release for that.
It's a good idea.
Thank you for a good idea.
Yeah. Every once in a while, you know. So, if there's no additional questions, I guess we can move down our agenda, and the next thing is audience participation. Does anyone? Yes, sir.
I do have a question on the risk limiting audit. To try to understand this a little bit, I understand you scanned in 2,100 ballots, something like that, and then you applied an algorithm to randomly select X amount of ballots, is that correct? And then those randomly selected ballots were compared to a hand count to see if they were correctly adjudicated? Is that how that works?
I believe you're correct, sir. And what was your name?
John Henry?
John Henry. Okay.
That was my question. And the other question I have is, was this test, I noticed there's 3 tabulator machines. Was this same test run through all 3 tabulator machines? And were they duplicated? Did the results come out the same? Or were they run through a single tabulator machine? That's my question.
Well, we can answer the question, or it'll be in our report.
If you know it, go ahead and answer right now.
Okay, no ballots were scanned through the scanning machines. That was Mr. Constant's question. We did not re-scan ballots. So what we did was we hand counted, and that's what this is. This is the hand count. And then what we did was verified the adjudication of those randomly selected ballots. I think I also mentioned that there were 772 or some batches of ballots, and we took them from 2 different tabulators. We didn't use one of the tabulators because we didn't use it very much during the election. So we took 53% of the batches from the tabulator that was used 53% of the time, and 47% of the batches from the tabulator that was used the next most. And that's, then we calculated the system, the pseudo-random number generator then selected the batches to review from those numbers that I just gave you.
Anyone else interested in?
Can I follow up on that? I think what he's asked, why he asked if they were put back to the tabulator, could be clarified by you by saying they've been through the tabulator once, so you already know what that ballot was adjudicated by the tabulator one time, right?
He knows that.
Yeah. So there's no
So the
reason to
answer
run it.
is the same
Yeah.
as I said before.
Right. There's no reason to run it through again.
No.
Yeah.
Are you able to duplicate those results?
Okay.
Duplicate.
I just wanted to
Running
verify
the
that
same-
for my own benefit.
Same algorithm, running the same batch and duplicate it on the various
I
machines?
just wanted to ask for my
Or is it just a one pass? Is it just a single pass? And that's
Through the
verified?
chair, I think this is I have a report that I'm going to give to you about the risk limiting audit. It was publicly noticed. It was open to the public. It's really hard to explain and really complicated. I'm working on my report for you, and it will be public, it'll be sent to the assembly, and I think that'll answer these questions.
Okay. All right.
And if you want to talk to me afterwards, I can talk to you afterwards about it, John.
I'd just like to get a copy of the report.
It's not done yet. It's not done yet.
Yes,
Hi,
ma'am.
Joan Henry.
Okay.
First, I have a few questions. I was just wondering who was involved in performing the audit?
This section is for comments, not necessarily questions.
Oh, okay. Well, then, my comment would be, for all my questions that I have, first of all, to be an auditor, you have to have credentials. And if you are running an election, technically, you should not be running the audit. You would have an independent party doing the audit. So to me, this is a conflict of interest if it's the election workers performing the audit on their election.
I see. Any additional audience participation?
I would probably only just echo that. I'm president of multiple homeowners associations, and we have a outside audit company do an audit on every single one of our books. The management company that manages the actual homeowners association does not do their own audit. We do an outside audit, every single one of them. So just to echo what she was saying is having the person that does the books check the books, in my opinion, is probably not a good practice.
And your name, sir?
Dave Weir.
Dave Weir, okay. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Brenda Hasty, I would also like to reiterate that too. In the private sector, it is, even if it is within the same company, there's an outside party that comes in and conducts the audits. It's not the same department conducting their audit of themselves.
Okay. Any other comments from the audience?
Through the chair, I think it's important if you take a look at our elections best practices, where we're recommending adding to our best practices pre and post-election audits. And I will provide you the information when I complete my report to you about the risk limiting audit. And risk limiting audits and logic and accuracy testing are conducted by election officials. Election officials want to know that the system is performing as it should. We want to make sure, as I mentioned, in the other jurisdiction, that the ballots will tabulate and read through the machine accurately. That's as important to us as anyone else. This is not an independent outside financial audit. It's an election risk limiting audit. And we're following best practices for both our logic and accuracy testing, where the Election Commission is involved. The Election Commission doesn't work for the staff. The election commissioners were here. You can see them in the pictures. And the other part of it is that it's open to the public. And those are two of the steps that we use to make sure that the audit is open and transparent. And I think you'll see from the report that it performed as it was supposed to.
Fantastic.
I would add to that.
Mr. Conson?
Yeah, thank you. My experience in various entities, private and public, is that there are a number of cases where audits are conducted by staff in their own department to understand what's happening. And internal, external audits are two different things. And if there's any concern by the department, elections, I think it wouldn't hurt to invite Michael Chadwick to participate if he hasn't been invited, just so that conversation is part of it. But otherwise, I think it's actually normal to have internal audit work done in the preparation for any process. In case an elections commission finds some kind of issue, you can come back to that point and say, look, this is what we did. And so to me, it's perfectly reasonable.
Well, and the commission is an independent commission. They do not work for the muni, and they're not involved in day-to-day operations of counting ballots. So their function is to make sure everything is done properly and prepare a report so we can certify the election, so the assembly can certify the election.
Through the chair, Mr. Chadwick, the internal auditor, was invited he's always invited to election night. That is one time he was invited, and he's usually invited at a couple of other spots too. He came down when we did the random alphabet drawing, and so the code identifies 3 people that we can invite, and we have invited him on some of those occasions.
Great, yeah, it just
Most
seems
of those occasions.
logical that
Yeah.
he would be, and it makes sense that he was.
Yes,
Thank you.
very much.
Yes, yes, ma'am.
Brenda Hasty. I just want to say, with the logic and accuracy testing being done tomorrow, in advance of that, I would hope I have some software testing experience from my professional career, that we won't be conducting those testing on a live environment, that you have another environment that you'll be running these tests through, an exact copy of the software that you'll be doing, but on a different server, so you're not losing the integrity of the data for the live election that will be tabulated. As in this last election is what happened, right? We had some test data that was that dirtied up the election and then caused some functionality to be overridden. So we don't want to recreate that scenario for this election by planning ahead.
I would speak to that. I think that is fine for a member of the public to assert that something was dirtied up. But I think that the record demonstrates that that's not a fact. It can certainly be asserted as an opinion.
Yes, sir.
Henry, I disagree with Mr. Compton. I don't think when you access a machine during election or anything like that, we're not accusing anybody of anything wrong, but it's a bad practice. It's a very bad practice. And part of this issue was you're trying to get public confidence in the election system, and that does not give public confidence, not one single bit.
I think that we're out of order now. This process was supposed to be 3 minutes for a member of the public to speak. I would just say, in response, that the term dirtied up is in fact a label for a lack of integrity. And so
Overriding functionality.
Right, and so I just would offer that I'm only reflecting on the words, and for my part, I defend these elections as free and fair, despite any allegations that are unproven and yet asserted as fact.
Okay. Well, we're closing in on 1 o'clock, and everyone's had a chance to make their comments, and so I want to thank everyone for coming. This meeting is adjourned.